October 13, 1944, just before dawn. A gray mist hung low over the Bavarian countryside, swirling between the gnarled tree trunks and over the stone walls of Stalag Luft III. Inside the barbed wire fences, dozens of captured American aviators were being marched under guard through the freezing morning fog. Second Lieutenant David Marks had spent 2 years flying B-17s over Germany. His final mission, a daylight raid over Bremen, had ended with his right engine on fire, black smoke trailing across the sky, and flak tearing through the fuselage like claws. He had bilayed out at 14,000 feet. The German farmer who found him pulled a rifle faster than he could raise his hands. Now, marching under the shadow of rifle barrels, he listened. Not to boots, not to the guards, not even to the rustling of trees. He heard heels, leather soles, graceful, deliberate steps echoing on stone. It wasn't part of the usual prison routine. It wasn't guards, and it wasn't rain. The prisoners were being taken somewhere else. When they rounded the corner, the fog broke and the building emerged. Red brick walls, shuttered windows, a long corridor flanked with clean beds, warm light, and something none of them expected. Nurses in pressed white aprons holding clipboards, their blonde hair tucked beneath caps, waiting for them. Marks blinked. He had expected a dungeon, not this. A German orderly stepped forward and barked something in clipped Hochdeutsch. Then, in broken English, "You will be housed here, for treatment, for morale." And just like that, the gate closed behind them. No shackles, no screaming, no boots. Just warm beds, fresh bread, soap, clean bandages, and nurses who greeted them not like enemies but like honored guests. David Marks had never been more confused in his life. That was the moment he realized this wasn't just a hospital, it was a test. And whatever game the Germans were playing, it had already begun. Marks had a broken rib from the bailout, nothing serious but enough to sideline him. They assigned him to a small private room, the sheets crisp, the pillows fluffed, and the windows clear enough to see the early snow clinging to the pines beyond. "Lieutenant Marks," a voice said softly behind him. He turned. The nurse wore a Red Cross armband. Her name tag read Anna Weiss. She was no older than 25. Her English was precise, laced with a German accent, but her tone was calm, almost warm. "You are stable but undernourished. We will monitor your vitals. You will eat full meals. You will bathe. Is that understood?" He nodded slowly. She gave a tight smile. "Very good. You will find we take our work seriously." Then she walked out, heels echoing down the corridor. Marks exhaled, slow, wary. What the hell was this place? That night, he wasn't given prison rations. He was served black bread with caraway, hot lentil soup, and even a sliver of chocolate. None of the guards shouted. No one was slapped or dragged. The men were spoken to as patients. Some of the older nurses even addressed them formally, Herr Lieutenant, as though they were officers in the wrong army, not enemies. But behind the politeness was something else. Everything was too measured, too scripted, too perfect. Marks wasn't the only one who noticed. In the corner room, Staff Sergeant Roy Martinez, a tail gunner from Texas, leaned over during morning rounds and whispered, "This ain't no normal prison, man. You seen the towels, they're monogrammed." The others muttered similar things. Fresh eggs, real coffee, nurses who smiled but never answered personal questions. And still no interrogation, no beatings, just daily temperature checks, physical therapy, hot water, and what appeared to be genuine concern. The men began calling it the castle. "Guess we finally got our ticket to the country club," Martinez joked. But no one really laughed. Because every American in that ward, whether missing a leg or just scraped from a crash, had fought in a war where prisoners vanished, where guards beat men for blinking too slow. This wasn't war, This was theater. And they didn't know what act they were in. On the fourth day, Marks heard piano music. Real music, not a record. Live. He crept out of his bed and down the hallway. In the rec room, 2 German nurses were seated beside a Luftwaffe officer playing a Steinway upright. The tune was Brahms. No one saluted. No one shouted. One of the nurses turned and noticed him. She smiled and gestured toward a chair. He sat. And they played through the whole piece. Afterward, the officer stood, nodded once and left without a word. No orders, no propaganda. Just music. That night he couldn't sleep. He lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the snow tap against the shutters. It wasn't the warmth, it wasn't the food. It was the way the nurses looked at him, not with hate, not with pity, but with something else. Marks didn't know what scared him more, brutality, or whatever this was. By the end of the first week, something had changed. The men were cleaner, stronger, they joked more, they sang songs. One of them swore a nurse had flirted with him. Another said he caught one sketching portraits of the Americans in secret. One morning, Anna Weiss returned to Marks's room carrying a tray. "Today we walk," she said, "no excuses." He nodded, sitting up with a wince. She helped him to his feet. Her hands were steady, warm, precise. As they stepped out onto the gravel path, the fog was lifting. Somewhere down the valley, an American bomber droned overhead. They both paused. She looked up, expression unreadable. He did too, heart pounding. Then she said quietly, "It won't last forever, you know, none of this." He turned to her, "The war." She shook her head once, "The illusion." Then she smiled and kept walking. The first week turned into 10 days, then 2 weeks. And the castle, whatever it really was, remained unchanged. The guards never raised their voices. The nurses remained courteous. The food kept coming hot. The sheets stayed pressed. And every morning, the same rhythm. Medication, vitals, brisk walks down gravel paths flanked by pine, and strange, clipped conversations with the nurses that revealed nothing, except that all of this was being maintained with precision. No beatings, no isolation, no interrogations. But no explanations either. Marks watched it all with a pilot's instinct, scanned the instruments, listened for the engine tone. Something was off. One afternoon, during his mandated recovery walk, Anna paused by the courtyard wall. The pine needles crunched under her heels. "There was another crash," she said softly, "2 days ago, near Wernberg." Marks kept his expression still. "American." She nodded. "We think P-51s. They were burned when they arrived." "Alive." "One for now." He glanced at her. "What's happening here?" She didn't look at him. "Reputation," she said, "and timing." Then she turned away and began walking again, her voice flat as stone. "You should enjoy the food while it lasts." The new pilot arrived the next day. He was younger, maybe 19, with burns across his hands and neck. The skin was bubbled, his eyes glassy from morphine. They wheeled him in on a stretcher, the nurses unusually quiet. Marks leaned against the doorframe, watching. A German doctor, older, with silver hair and a crisp white coat, adjusted the IV and said something low to one of the nurses in German. The woman nodded, eyes downcast. Anna noticed him watching. "Come," she said, "you will not help him by standing there." Marks followed her out into the hallway, the heavy door swinging shut behind them. "He'll make it," she said after a pause, "but there will be pain." "You could have let him die," Marks said. "You've let others die." Anna turned sharply. "And what do you know of that?" Marks didn't answer. She stepped closer. "You think this is all some performance, that we smile because we want something from you. Isn't it?" "No," she said. "It's because we were told to treat you as honored prisoners. The Americans will win. That's what they told us. They said, when the surrender comes, let the pilots live. He blinked. Who told you that? Doctors, officers, not the fanatics in Berlin, the ones who know. She exhaled slowly. Do you understand now? He nodded once. He understood. This wasn't mercy. This was surrender in slow motion. By the third week, some of the Americans began asking for newspapers, for radios. One of the guards slipped in a crumpled copy of Völkischer Beobachter, but only the front page mattered. Soviets pushed toward Berlin. Marx read it twice, then looked at the date, October 25th. The Reich was folding. And here in the hills, someone had decided these American pilots were more useful alive than dead. It didn't stop strange things from happening. One night after lights out, the power flickered. Marx, half asleep, heard boots in the hallway, not guards, not nurses. He got up, cracked his door. Two men in long black coats moved down the corridor, civilian suits beneath. One carried a briefcase, the other a cane. They entered room 6. That was where Lieutenant Harrison was recovering. The door shut. No voices, no shouting. 15 minutes later, they left. Harrison was gone by morning. The nurses didn't speak of it. Sergeant Martinez cornered Marx in the courtyard 2 days later. You seen Harrison? Marx shook his head. Not since Tuesday. Something's off, Martinez said. They keep giving us wine, bread, soap, but every week another guy disappears. You ask where he went, they smile and say transferred. Marx didn't answer. You ever wonder, Martinez said, if we're being traded? Traded. Used, Martinez said. Like showpieces, they parade us when they need leverage. Look at how well we treat American prisoners. And when the war turns? Martinez didn't smile. Then maybe we're witnesses they don't want walking out of here. Anna brought Marx his breakfast tray in silence that morning. When she turned to go, he asked quietly, Have you heard about Harrison? She paused at the door. He was sent to another facility. Which one? She didn't answer. Then she looked over her shoulder. There are rules here, Lieutenant, and rules above those rules. Then she walked out. Late that night, he found her sitting alone on a stone bench in the courtyard, her hands folded tightly in her lap. You're not like the others, he said. She didn't move. They say war reveals who we are. He sat beside her, and she smiled faintly. Then I'm afraid. Of what? She looked toward the mountains, the silhouette of pines against the moonlight. Of what comes after this ends, of what's waiting when Berlin finally falls. Marx said nothing. She turned to him. You know we're not all monsters, don't you? I know, he said, but I don't think that'll matter soon. She nodded once, then stood. Be careful who you speak to. Not every nurse here is a nurse. Then she walked back into the building, leaving him alone with the cold. The next morning a new guard arrived. Not Wehrmacht, Waffen-SS. Black uniform, silver skulls. He stood taller, didn't speak, just watched. The nurses avoided his gaze. The older doctor didn't come to rounds that day. At lunch, Martinez leaned in close and whispered, We're getting moved. How do you know? They're packing crates in the cellar, and one of the Red Cross trucks left with blankets this morning. Empty. Could be resupply. No, Martinez said, it's a pullout. They're shutting the castle down. Marx felt it too. The illusion was cracking. That evening, the piano was gone. The radio was removed. The fire in the main hall was left unlit for the first time since arrival. Anna passed by during rounds. Her eyes didn't meet his. He stepped into the hallway. Where are they taking us? He asked. Her hands tightened on the chart. I don't know, she said, then added, I'm not going. Why not? She hesitated, then said, because someone has to stay when the Americans arrive. You think they're that close? She looked him straight in the eyes, closer than you think. Then she walked away. In the middle of the night, the guards roused them. No shouting, no brutality, just clipped orders. Prepare to move, 1 hour. They were loaded into trucks, quiet, cold, confused. Marks looked out the back window as the castle faded behind them, stone walls vanishing into the mist. He thought he saw Anna standing on the steps, a white apron barely visible in the moonlight. He raised a hand. She didn't wave. She just watched. Then the truck turned the bend, and she was gone. The convoy moved under cover of night, headlights blacked out, engines rumbling low over frostbitten roads. Mark sat in the back of the second truck, knees pressed to his chest, coat pulled tight against the cold. Martinez sat beside him, jaw clenched, staring into the dark. No one spoke. The truck bounced over ruts and potholes. The countryside blurred into fog and treetops. Occasionally, flares lit the distant sky, silent flashes that meant the front was drawing closer. After 4 hours, the convoy stopped. The guards didn't speak. They slid the doors open, motioned with rifles. The Americans were herded out into the pre-dawn chill and led down a gravel path to a compound surrounded by chain-link fences. This was no castle, no brick walls, no pianos. Just barracks, barbed wire, and silence. It wasn't a labor camp, but it wasn't a hospital either. There were no nurses. Inside, the air smelled of coal smoke and boiled potatoes. A guard pushed Marks and Martinez toward a bunkhouse where dozens of new arrivals huddled under threadbare blankets. No one looked up. A sergeant in a Luftwaffe coat entered and said in English, "You will wait here. No talking after lights out. Medical inspection tomorrow. Cooperate and there will be no problem." Then he left. The door locked. Martinez leaned over. Hell of a downgrade. Marks didn't answer. He kept thinking about Anna, the way she had stood on the steps unmoving, the way she had said, "I'm not going." It didn't feel like kindness. It felt like penance. 3 days passed in cold monotony. They were given gray uniforms with POW numbers stitched into the sleeves. Food came on metal trays. 1 boiled potato, 1 ladle of watery cabbage stew. No wine, no bread, no nurses. No information. A few Red Cross trucks appeared, uniformed clerks with clipboards, taking names, asking questions, checking off lists. But they offered no explanations. "Where are the nurses?" one pilot asked. "Transferred," was the only answer. Marks tried pressing. "Where did they go? Where were we?" The clerk shrugged. "I don't have clearance." That night Martinez whispered, "We're disappearing, a little more each day." In the 4th week, they were lined up for medical inspection. Mark stood in line, arms crossed against the wind, as a German doctor walked slowly down the row, flanked by a translator and 2 guards. The doctor stopped in front of him. Name: Second Lieutenant David Marks, 8th Air Force, 457th Bomb Group. The doctor glanced at the clipboard. Stalag identification confirmed. He paused, then looked up. "You were at Weisfeld." Marks tensed. "Is that what you called it?" The doctor didn't answer. Instead, he motioned to a nurse standing beside him. She was younger, unfamiliar. Her uniform was cleaner than the others, new perhaps, or from a different program entirely. She held a syringe. "Immunizations," the doctor said. "Influenza, typhus, standard precaution." Marks hesitated. "It's not optional," the doctor said. The needle went in. The nurse said nothing. She didn't meet his eyes. That night Martinez sat beside him on the bunk. "I don't trust any of this." Marks looked at the red dot on his arm. It ached. "Neither do I." "They marked us," Martinez said. "You think this is medical, it's sorting. They're preparing for something." Marks exhaled. "Like what?" Martinez didn't answer. because whatever answer he had, it didn't make sense anymore. A month later, the real winter hit. Snow buried the fence posts. The coal stoves burned low. Coughs echoed through the bunkhouse at night. Men pulled socks over their hands, wrapped scarves around their faces. A rumor began to spread. The nurses from Weisfeld had been arrested. Someone claimed a Red Cross report had listed them as collaborators. Someone else said they'd been sent to camps in the East. Marx didn't know what to believe. But the part that stuck with him was this: none of them had disappeared until the Americans started winning. In February, the guards grew more nervous. They shouted more, marched faster, began moving prisoners in groups, transfers they claimed, always in the dead of night. One morning, Marx woke to find Martinez's bunk empty. He searched the camp for 2 days, asked the guards, asked the clerks. No one answered. On the third night, he heard a knock. 3 taps, then silence. Then another 3. He opened the door a crack. Nothing, just wind. Then he saw it, tucked in the corner under the steps, a piece of cloth, rolled tight. Inside was a single Red Cross armband. And beneath it, folded in quarters, was a page torn from a ledger. 4 names. One circled. David Marx. 2 days later, a new transport arrived. The guards called for 20 names. Marx was on the list. They were given coats, new ones, shoes, the old prisoner uniforms replaced with clean field jackets, still marked as POWs but fresher. He was loaded into a different truck this time. Wooden benches, no bars. The guards sat in front, not facing them. Hours passed. They didn't stop at any camp. Instead, they rolled up to a country inn, small stone walls, green shutters, somewhere near the border. Inside, a woman waited. She wore a nurse's coat, but not Red Cross, not military. Just white. She looked at each of them and said in crisp, clean English, "You will stay here until further instructions. You will not leave the grounds. Food will be provided. Do not ask questions. Do not speak to the staff." Then she handed each man a single paper slip. No stamp, no seal, no explanation. Just a name, a location, and a set of numbers. Marx's paper read, Weisfeld, room 17, transfer complete. And under that in small type, you are not to discuss your previous accommodations. He looked at the woman. Why me? She didn't blink. You were already marked. Then she turned and walked away. The rooms in the inn were warm, too warm. Marx sat on the edge of a bed too soft, in a room too quiet, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of lavender and starch. There were curtains, a desk, a window that opened onto the empty hills. The other men, those brought in the same truck, had been scattered into separate rooms. No conversations, no questions, just silence enforced by absence. He hadn't seen a single other prisoner since arrival. Each morning breakfast arrived on a tray. Black bread, a boiled egg, coffee, real coffee, but no names, no guards, no uniforms. Only one woman in white who moved through the hall without speaking. Marx kept the slip of paper tucked in his breast pocket. Weisfeld, room 17, transfer complete. But this was Weisfeld, and room 17 didn't exist here. Or if it did, it was behind a door he hadn't found. On the third day, the woman finally spoke. "You may walk the grounds," she said. Her accent was clipped, Eastern, "but you must return by sunset." "Why?" Marx asked. She didn't answer. The hills were brown and bare, dusted with old snow. A fence line wrapped the estate in quiet threat, though no one guarded it. No towers, no dogs. It was as if the Germans no longer expected prisoners to run. Or no longer cared. He walked to the edge of the orchard and found an old bench beside a gnarled tree. The wood was cracked, a carving etched into its surface. 1942, Fouer Marie. He sat. Wind stirred the branches. Far in the distance, artillery thumped like distant thunder, the front still moving. The world was collapsing just beyond the hills, and here, in this strange, sterile quiet, he had no purpose, no orders, no comrades. Only questions. That night the woman brought dinner. She lingered. "You fought in Bremen." He blinked, yes. Her gaze didn't waver. "You dropped bombs on the river yards." "Yes. My brother worked in those yards." Marx froze. "I'm sorry." She set the tray down. "So am I." Then she left. The next morning, the door to the sitting room was open. Inside, a fireplace burned low, and a man in civilian clothes sat reading a newspaper printed in English. He looked up as Marx entered, late 50s, clean-shaven. His eyes were blue, empty. "Sit, Lieutenant." Marx sat. The man folded the paper. "You were at Weisfeld." "Yes." "You remember the nurses?" Marx hesitated. "Yes." "Which one did you speak to most?" "Anna Weiss." The man nodded slowly. "Do you believe she helped you?" "I think she kept me alive." "Do you believe she broke protocol?" "What does that mean?" "Did she express opinions outside official guidelines? Did she ever suggest the war would end in defeat, that Germany would surrender?" Marx narrowed his eyes. "Why are you asking me this?" "Because the Reich is collapsing," the man said, "and people are choosing sides." He stood. "One day soon, Allied forces will reach this place. You will be liberated, and you will be asked what you saw, what you were told, who treated you with humanity." Then he walked past Marx toward the door. "Wait," Marx said. "Where is she?" The man paused, hand on the doorframe. "She stayed too long in the wrong uniform." Then he was gone. The snow came heavy the next day. The orchard vanished beneath a blanket of white. Marx stared out the window and felt the weight of it settle over him like a second skin. That evening, when the dinner tray arrived, it held something new. A folded note tucked beside the bread. 3 words. "Don't trust anyone." No signature, no handwriting he recognized. But he understood. The inn emptied gradually. One by one, the other Americans vanished. No goodbyes, no warnings. Their rooms were made up the next day, trays cleared without comment. By the end of February, Marx was the only one left. He stopped sleeping. The woman in white stopped speaking. Then finally, one morning, she didn't appear. He opened his door. The hallway was empty. No footsteps, no trays, no voices. He walked the hall calling out, nothing. Then, from the far end of the corridor, he heard it. A door creaking, slow. He followed the sound. At the end of the hallway, a new door stood ajar, a brass number nailed to the center. 17. He pushed it open. The room was cold. No bed, no chairs, just a table, a folder, and a photograph under glass. He stepped inside. The photograph showed Anna Weiss in a Red Cross uniform, standing beside a file cabinet. Her face turned toward the camera, her expression unreadable. On the table, a single-page dossier. Her name, date of birth, hospital assignments, notations in German, one final line in red ink. Deemed compromised. Subject unfit for post-war clearance. Transfer to civilian authorities suspended. He stared at the page. Not executed. Not imprisoned. Just erased. He tore the page in half, then in quarters, then again. He walked out of room 17 and never went back. 2 weeks later, the Americans arrived. The liberation was quiet. A single jeep, a translator, orders to collect the remaining POWs. The officer who greeted him offered a cigarette, glanced at the building. "Strange place," he said. Marx nodded. "You were here long." Not sure. You kept in contact with any of the nurses from earlier? No. The officer pulled out a notepad. You'll be debriefed in Munich. They'll want everything. Names, conversations, anything helpful for war crimes review. Marx looked at the orchard beyond the fence. The snow had started to melt. I'll tell them what I remember. The officer clapped him on the back. Good man. They drove away. Marx spent the last days of the war in Munich, sleeping on a cot inside a requisitioned schoolhouse with broken windows and a rusted bell tower that rang no longer. The war was over, not declared, not announced with fanfare, but with the slow, grinding collapse of certainty. German soldiers surrendered with hands held high, tossing rifles into ditches. Civilians lined roads with blank eyes, and the American trucks never stopped arriving. But victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like waking from a long, strange dream and realizing you'd been walking through someone else's illusion. Marx was debriefed by a captain with polished boots and a clipboard. Questions were asked, names recorded, locations logged. Tell us about the nurses, the captain said. I remember Anna, Marx said. Anna Weiss. Yes. Did she participate in any known abuse, interrogations, collaborations? No. Was she present during any disappearances? No. Was she loyal to the regime? I don't know, Marx said. She wore the uniform, but I don't think she believed in it. The captain didn't look up. Not believing isn't the same as opposing. No, Marx said, but it's not nothing. They sent him back to England in April, on a C-47 crammed with other former POWs, each man clutching a duffel bag, a discharge slip, and a silence that said more than words could. At the camp outside Dover, he slept in a real bed for the first time in months. It felt wrong, too clean, too far from the front. That night he dreamed of Room 17, of the sound her heels made on stone, and the sound of her voice when she said, "The illusion won't last forever." 3 weeks later, he was cleared to ship home. He stood on the deck of the SS Brazil, leaning against the rail, watching Europe vanish into cloud and salt. He held the slip of paper still folded in his coat pocket. It had survived transport, mud, snow, capture, and liberation. One name, one room, one sentence. You are not to discuss your previous accommodations. He could have thrown it overboard, but he didn't. They docked in New York on May 10th. Bands played, women cried, officers barked orders, and journalists hovered like gnats. He smiled for the photo, shook hands, let his mother kiss his forehead in the crowd. But his eyes kept drifting to the edges of the celebration, looking for white coats, braided hair, German vowels. Looking for ghosts. In August, he received a letter. Typed, no return address, no seal, just a city, Geneva. Inside, a single sheet. We regret to inform you that the subject Anna Weiss was detained by Allied command in April of this year. She has since been released under insufficient evidence of war collaboration. Her current location is unknown. Should further testimony be required, you will be contacted. No signature, no closing. He read it 3 times, then folded it and placed it beside the old paper from Room 17. He never heard from them again. He didn't speak of Weisfeld for years. Not to his wife, not to the army, not to other veterans who toasted their survival with bourbon and smoke in basement bars. Because what could he say? That some prisoners were treated like guests, that the people they were taught to hate had washed their wounds, brushed their coats, and spoke in perfect, practiced kindness. That the only woman who had looked at him without fear or scorn had vanished into silence when the world shifted under her feet. That mercy, too, had a price. He worked for the post office, bought a small house, had a son, buried his medals in a drawer he never opened. But some nights, alone on the porch with a glass of rye, He'd remember the sound of the gate at Weisfeld clicking shut, the warmth of clean sheets, the steam from black coffee, the way Anna never flinched. And he would wonder for a long time if any of it had been real, or if it had always been a kind of performance, one last, dying attempt to control a world already burning. In 1965, long after most people had stopped asking questions, he returned to Germany. The inn was gone, bombed in the final weeks, nothing left but stone, rubble, and moss. He walked the path down the old fence line, found the orchard, now overgrown. And there, buried beneath 30 years of leaves and rot, was the bench. He brushed it clean with his sleeve, ran his fingers across the carving. "Für Marie." He sat, closed his eyes, listened for heels on gravel, but heard only wind. It wasn't until the fall of 1984 that David Marks finally found her name again. He wasn't looking for it. He stopped looking decades ago. The war had folded itself into a part of him that he kept quiet, not buried, just shelved. His son had taken him to the new Veterans Archive in Washington. Rows of files, some declassified, some barely translated. The young docents guided visitors to records, to transcripts, to aging carbon paper manifests and microfilm. It was his son who pulled the folder, laughing gently, saying, "Dad, this one's stamped Weisfeld. Isn't that the place you said was too clean?" He didn't laugh. He took the file, sat, opened it slowly. And there she was. Her name on an intake log. Anna Weiss, civilian nurse, Red Cross attached, Luftwaffe medical wing, stationed at temporary care facility, site classified as Weisfeld Complex B. Beneath it, subject reported voluntarily to Allied personnel in Munich, May 1945, provided testimony regarding humane treatment of Allied prisoners. Testimony. He blinked, turned the page. Her handwriting, thin, slanted German cursive, translated in margin notes. We were told they were valuable, that the Reich would fall and those men might remember who treated them with care. We were told to keep them alive, to keep them clean, to make it look like decency survived. But some of us believed it too. She had written that, not as defense, not as strategy, just as truth. He closed the folder. The room had gone very quiet. That night he couldn't sleep. The city lights pulsed through the window of the hotel, distant sirens humming somewhere beyond the Potomac. He thought of the orchard, the bench, the cold wind. And the room with no bed, just a folder and a photo under glass. He wrote her a letter. Not because he expected it to reach her. He didn't know if she was alive. Didn't know what name she might live under. Didn't know if she'd ever want to hear from a man who carried the weight of American bombs behind his eyes. But he wrote it anyway. He thanked her for mercy, for dignity, for speaking English when no one else did. He told her he had not forgotten, that none of them had. And that if she had survived history's furnace, then she deserved to hear that from someone who had seen it all from the other side. He signed it with only his name, no rank. Then he mailed it to no address at all. Just sealed it. Left it in the tide of the world. Somewhere, he believed, she was still walking a corridor, still carrying trays, still watching the weather change from a frost-streaked window. And if not, if the wind had taken her, then maybe it had carried her gently, like the soft clink of boots on marble, or the sound of a piano playing in a stone room beneath the weight of silence. He never spoke of her again, but he never forgot the room, the illusion, and the woman who had told him it wouldn't last forever, and who had been right.